I want to welcome you to this Social Work Week session. More specifically, it's a Social Work Day session, and I'm really pleased to be supporting this session. I'm joined by colleagues from Social Work England, and as well as from the British Association of Social Workers. I'll be introducing them shortly. So without further ado, I'm now going to bring you to our speakers. Today, as I said, we've got speakers from both the British Association of Social Workers as well as Social Work England. We have Andrew Rees and Chantal Thomas from Social Work England, and who I'm just bringing on screen there. And we also have Matthew Devlin and Sarah Blackmore from Social Work from Social Work England. So if I now pass over to Sarah. Thank you very much, Sarah. It's over to you.
Thanks, Gavin, and hopefully you can hear me okay. Just a minor correction, but a very important one. So colleagues Andrew and Chantal are from BASW, not Social Work England. But it's great to be here with everyone this afternoon, and a very, very happy World Social Work Day to you all. I'm delighted to be doing this session with my esteemed colleagues at BASW. This year's World Social Work Day theme, co-building hope and harmony, a Harambee Call to unite a divided society. Harambee is an African philosophy, meaning pulling together through shared responsibility, mutual support and collective strength. It reminds us that healing division isn't the task of one individual or one organisation. It requires all of us working side by side. For Social Work England and BASW, this theme resonates deeply. Social workers are often working at the front line of social fragmentation, and they see firsthand how inequality, mistrust and disconnection show up in people's lives. This joint Social Work England and BASW session will highlight how social workers, working alongside people and communities, can help cultivate unity, strengthen social bonds and build resilience in an increasingly divided society. It's powerful to come together on World Social Work Day because our roles, though distinct, share a common purpose to protect the public, champion positive change, and improve people's lives. Gavin, if you want to move the slides on, please, to the second one. And again, to the next one, please. Thank you. Our overarching statutory objective is simple but profound: to protect the public. Everything we do at Social Work England is focused on enabling safe, effective and trusted social work practice. Our role includes maintaining public confidence in the profession and promoting high professional standards. That's why collaboration is so central to how we regulate. We believe firmly in working with the profession, with people with lived experience, with employers and educators, and with our partners like BASW, because protecting the public isn't a solo endeavour, it's a collective one. It's Harambee in action, pulling together for the common good. Next slide, please, Gavin. As we look ahead, we're building on the strong foundations we've established as a specialist regulator for the social work profession. First, we're focusing on strengthening our processes so they are more timely, compassionate and effective. We know the impact that regulatory processes can have on people's lives, and we want every interaction to reflect fairness, humanity and clarity. Second, we are committed to increasing understanding, trust and confidence, not just in Social Work England, but in the social work profession itself. Regulation plays a crucial role in shaping how the public sees social work, and we want that perception to reflect the dedication, expertise and relational skill at the heart of the profession. And hopefully some of you will have seen the launch of our Change the Script campaign yesterday, which we have worked on with partners to ensure that we can tell the real stories of social work and reflect the breadth of our profession and the amazing impact that social workers have on so many people's lives every day in this country. We also recognise the value of the insights we hold from education, from fitness to practice, from the workforce. And these insights allow us to connect themes and trends that can help shape the social work landscape for the better and for the future. Sharing this learning widely is part of how we pull together with the sector to identify solutions. And finally, we want to champion positive change across the social worker's whole professional journey, whether in practice, in leadership, education, or new and emerging roles. This is about creating the conditions where social workers can succeed and thrive, and where people and communities receive the support they deserve. Looking ahead, our ambition is to continue shaping social work collaboratively, informed by evidence and grounded in the collective spirit that the Harambee theme calls us to embrace. And now I'm delighted to hand over to my colleague Andrew at BASW.
Do you want to move the slides on, Kevin, please? I don't think you can hear the theme. Sorry, introduce myself, Andrew Rees, strategic lead for Wales and England for BASW, the British Association of Social Workers. Just want to start by saying I don't think you can repeat the theme or overemphasize the importance of the theme for this year's World Social Work Day. Co-building hope and harmony, a Harambee Call to unite a divided society. And it goes on to say, highlighting the role social work can play in bringing people together across communities, cultures and systems to shape a more inclusive and sustainable tomorrow. So Social Work England as a regulator and the British Association of Social Workers as a membership organisation have very different roles, but I think I like to think of us as two sides of the same coin. And I think, that quote at the top, a thriving profession needs a strong and effective regulator working in partnership with a strong and effective membership organisation. And I think it's an absolutely key part of our relationship with Social Work England, and how between us we can represent the profession and help strengthen the profession. We need to work together in that Harambee spirit, and demonstrate that we can work together and work effectively. We won't always agree on everything. We will speak truth to power, as it were, if we think Social Work England can do better on things, and we have been doing that in terms of thinking about talking and engaging with Social Work England about things like fitness to practice, fees, etc. But we still have to get on. We still have to be friends. We still have to be grown up about the conversations we have. And I think it's a really symbolic event today that we're doing this event jointly together on World Social Work Day, and want to have a conversation with you together about what, as the regulator and as the membership association, we can be doing together to strengthen social work. So the answer to that question, no, we're not strange bedfellows. It's an absolutely key relationship that has to work for the benefit of all social work and all the people that we as social workers support. And a big part of that is about collaborating on shared priorities. The next slide, please, Gavin. So you heard Gavin did the disclaimer. This is not Social Work England policy. This is me, and it's probably not official BASW policy either. This is me thinking about, as in working together, what are the sort of things we should be looking at together to help improve and strengthen the social work profession in England. What are our shared priorities? So I think most of these are pretty uncontroversial and pretty straightforward. We all want a strong and self-confident profession. We all have a really strong interest together in improving practice and improve social work practice across the board, and in particularly improving outcomes for the people we support, whether they're adults, whether they're children, whether it's in the criminal justice system, whether it's in small voluntary organisations or a sort of large statutory local authority. We all want social work to be an attractive profession to join. The students of the future, the sixth formers who are thinking about their A-level choices, we want them to hear positive stories about social work and to be attracted to the idea of that they can join a profession that makes a difference across society. And so great to see Social Work England. I can't remember what your campaign was called. Sorry, Sarah, I missed it. But that campaign about telling the story differently and getting social work in front of people and helping people understand what social work is really about. I think a key theme for today in terms of that uniting divided society and in the context of a hostile environment that social workers and the people we support are facing, we have a common interest in having a safe workforce that's protected from harm, whether that's online, at work, or in the community. And I think really importantly as well is about making sure that social work is recognised and celebrated for the value it brings to wider society. We want to hear stories about how social work has made a difference, how social work is supporting people to improve their lives, and not just about the negatives and the reviews and the child deaths. So there's so many positive stories out there, and it's really important that we can work together to tell those stories and help people understand what the reality of social work is. And on that note, the reality of social work, I'm going to hand over to Chantel, who's the vice chair. Sorry, we've got news tomorrow, but she's vice chair for today of BASW England.
Thank you. Was that a bit of a slip there, Andrew? What's happening? But yeah, no, thank you. And it's really, absolute honour to be here today. Just wanting to start with saying happy Social Work Day for all the social workers. For me, it's social work week, social work month, social work year. It's amazing being a social worker and the work that we do. Often we're not, given the flowers that we deserve. So, I'm going to offer flowers, virtual flowers. I should have taken your background, Andrew, and offered it to all the social workers out there. I think it's really important as well. But yeah, really excited about this conversation today, particularly on, today, a special day. And as we heard the theme, you can't say the theme enough times, co-building hope and harmony. It really speaks to that collective, the call to unite a divided time. It really speaks to what is going on around us, politically, socially, and all the other lees that you can imagine. But it also asks us something quite practical of us. When we think about the theme, it asks us something quite practical. And it's not just that we work alongside each other. So sticking to the themes about the differences and the similarities between Social Work England and BASW, I really want to speak to that a bit more. And I think it's really important that we're clear about how each organisation contributes to the profession and speaks to the theme as well, and what our shared goals are is really, really important. And I think that's where the conversations like this matter, because clarifying that builds the trust, and trust is what makes collaboration meaningful. Without trust, what do we have? So from my perspective, one strength of the social work landscape, particularly in England, is that we have distinct roles, and that we serve a different but complementary purposes. So Social Work England and BASW, very distinct organisations, but we are, working together in the Harambee type of way. For instance, as we've heard, we know Social Work England is it's a critical role you play as a regulator, setting professional standards, holding the register, but also ensuring public protection and accountability. Whereas for us in BASW, we're a membership organisation. I'm focusing on England, but of course, BASW is a nationwide organisation, and it's the only professional body for social workers advocating for social work. Bolder voice, stronger presence in particular spaces. Is what we need to really be encouraging, shaping policy and championing, the values and the ethics of the profession. And I think sometimes, that can be missed in the practicalities of the day-to-day. Social justice. Ethics and values is the foundation of who we are and what we do as social workers, but sometimes can be the hardest to enact because of the climate, the hostile environment that sometimes we find ourselves working in. And for me, someone working, within anti-racist practice, you heard I'm the chair, vice chair for BASW England. I also found and direct an organisation called the Anti-Racist Movement, which is a female-led platform, particularly looking around healing and that collective power. So I'm really, it's really important, about building movements. And I see these roles as necessary at a time like this, particularly in tension. And it's not a weakness. It's actually part of a healthy professional ecosystem. So the differences in what we do and how we do it is really, really important, because regulation brings accountability, and professional advocacy, brings the challenge and the change that we need for a united profession as well. And social work needs both, particularly as I said, if we're serious about addressing inequality and justice, we need the accountability from our regulators, but we also need the voice. We need that bold voice from the profession, and the members as well. But as I said, Harambee, all pulled together, it doesn't mean that we all do the same thing. It doesn't have to mean that. It shouldn't mean that. But it does mean that we have to understand the different roles that we have and understand it clearly. We have to respect those differences. Respect is really important with any kind of collaboration, and but we still have to choose to move in the same direction. So, as I said, we've got our two different goals. We've got different ways of working, but we all want the same thing, or both of us, both organisations want the same thing. And I think it's also important to say that at times social workers can experience these roles differently. I often get can be a misconception or misunderstanding about what each of the bodies do, each of the organisations do, and I think that's important. There can be some anxiety around regulation, fitness to practice, when we've got to get our Social Work England registration, CPD, in on a certain date, or was to get kicked off to register, and all of these things that can happen as well. But there can also be frustrations around systems, systems not doing what they're supposed to do, or it can feel quite oppressive sometimes, in our workspaces, outside of our workspaces. And if we're serious about co-building, if we're serious about the hope and harmony that this theme talks to us about, we have to create space to acknowledge these experiences, and not to dismiss them. It's really important we hear what members are saying. It's really important we understand what social workers want, and not be, dismissive or very, quite, authoritarian, which can often happen as well. And this is where the shared purpose becomes critical. Yeah, because ultimately both organizations are committed to upholding the standards. We both all want strength, strength in the profession, a stronger profession, a bolder profession, a louder voice, in different spaces. And we all want improved outcomes for the people and the communities that we serve. And I think, nobody can argue with that. Nobody can argue with that. So the question for me is not whether our roles are different. We know that they're different. But the question is, how can we work across these differences more transparently, more courageously, and more collaboratively? Because in a divided society, social work cannot afford fragmentation within its own profession. Harambee calls us to pull together, and that starts with clarity. It starts with honesty, and it starts with a shared commitment to do better, but we do better together. And I think that's really, really important. I'll pause. Thank you.
Thank you so much to my colleagues for those amazing insights, and I know that we will have lots of questions from colleagues who have joined us this afternoon for the first, I think, session of this kind of Social Work England and BASW celebrating World Social Work Day and Social Work Week together. So it really does feel like a bit of a landmark, and we want to give lots of time for questions. But when we opened Social Work Week yesterday, we had a really interesting set of reflections with people who use social work services, with a social work student, and with social workers working in different contexts. And one of the things that we talked about, and I'd be really interested to hear my colleagues' views on this, was our future ambitions for the profession. And some of that we've touched on a little bit, but mainly in terms of the roles that we have in our respective organisations. But I just wonder if we all went round and talked about what are our particular ambitions for our profession. And I don't mind going first because I've suggested it while you're putting your thinking caps on. But one of the things that I am always struck by with our profession is how humble we can be, but also how unique we are. And I suppose my future ambition, one of the many that I have for the future of my profession, is that we take much greater pride in who we are and what we do and the uniqueness of our role in society, because we are the only profession who sees the whole person. If you take our colleagues in the health sector, for example, if you take a cardiologist, they will only look at a person's heart and they won't consider any other part of that person. Social work is the only profession that looks at the whole person and considers where they are in terms of their family and community. And I think there is something that we need to be really proud of and step into that pride and own that about who we are as a profession and the impact that we have on people's lives and on wider society. So that's my tuppence worth for my future ambition. Chantal, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was bursting. I was like, I want to go next. I want to go next. Just because, yeah, mine, really nicely follows on from what you said there, Sarah. We are very, very humble about what we do in social work. And if you listen to the media, all we do is take away people's children. That's kind of, for children social workers, that's the image that we get. Or that's portrayed, about what we do. And I think there is something about, raising our voice, being bolder in our arguments, in who we're advocating for, in what we want, in what we do. So basically showcasing a lot more about who we are, what we stand for, what we're willing to accept and what we're not, and really standing in that truth. Andrew mentioned speaking truth to power, and I think that's really, really important. I think often as social workers we can feel like kind of second-class citizens. I work within an organisation, an NHS trust, where I'm working with psychotherapists, systemic therapists, and social work can be seen as the ugly sister. But as you said, we are, we see the whole person, we see the holistic picture, and we are more than just, carrying out assessments. We sit with people, we cry, we hold their hand, we accompany them to court. Yes, we may have to, go to court and do the heavy end stuff as well. But there's something about sitting in somebody's living room. I just did another session earlier where, this organisation has living rooms in the middle of the street, to bring the communities together. And there's something special, there's something unique, as you said, about what we do as social workers, and we need to talk about that more. We need to be bolder about what we do. We need to be less humble and blow our own trumpet, is what I'm trying to say as well. So yeah, absolutely, I agree with that, Sarah. Thank you.
Fantastic. There's a great joint role for us, for both organisations. Matthew, you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Sarah. I don't think I've introduced myself yet, so I'm Matthew Devlin. I'm the Head of Strategic Engagement here at Social Work England. It's going to feel a little bit like we've practiced this, because I'm going to lead on from what Chantal said, but we actually haven't practiced this answer. But I suppose for me, I've got lots of ambitions for the profession. I'm a really passionate social worker. But I really like the sort of uniqueness and breadth of role that social workers do. And I know we'll always have sort of social workers in adults roles, social workers in children's roles, social workers in mental health roles. There's long lists of what social workers do. But we see, when we see it on the register a lot, don't we, Sarah, at Social Work England, that's the incredible breadth of role that social workers do. And I think that's a real asset for the profession. And I think the values and the skills and the knowledge and the legislative understanding that social workers have got, I think offers a real unique skill set to lots and lots of different roles. And I think that's a huge positive for the profession. I think social workers bring huge positivity into those roles. We're seeing some of that showcased across Social Work Week this week. We had a session yesterday about forensic social work. We've got a session, I think, tomorrow on palliative social work. So all those different roles that I think social workers do, I think a huge positive, and I'd like to see that continue to be encouraged as it always has done. And I think, yeah, it's always, I'm never not surprised by when I hear lots of different roles that social workers do, and I'm always in awe of those social workers, and as I am every social worker on the register. But I think, yeah, it's a real positive and something that I think as a profession we should keep hold of.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Matthew. I mean, I've been a social worker for almost 30 years now, which I still find absolutely incredible, partly because it reminds me of just how old I am, but I'm still blown away by the breadth of context that social workers operate within. And, that's partly what we wanted to do through Change the Script and working with, the Turner Prize winning artist Helen Kamak, who was also a social worker herself, to paint her mural, to write her poem, to talk to the social workers who are in situations working where people might not necessarily associate social workers, because it is more than children and families work. It is more than child protection, although those roles are absolutely crucial to our profession and what we do, and they are brilliant, the people who work in those areas. But I think sometimes, particularly in the media, as we've talked about, that's all you see. And it's just the negative stories, and it's important that we both organisations have the opportunity to talk about the positives and highlight the positives of our profession. So last but not least, Andrew.
Okay, thanks everybody. So it is going to sound very terribly coordinated, because I've got something different to say as well. So first, I want to say one of the things I'm really proud about social work is that we step into the areas that other professions find really difficult. And I think assisted dying is a really strong point on that. BASW has been really strongly advocating within the committee stages in the House of Lords that, although we have a neutral position on assisted dying, that if it does go through, it should have a social worker in the panel that makes the decision about assisted dying and whether it's appropriate or not. And I think that speaks to our skill set about being able to have those difficult conversations and not being afraid to talk about things that are difficult and painful. I think the other thing I'm really proud about social work is with the only profession I can think of. Can you see this properly? It's a very human rights focused. No, you can't see it. So it's a BASW's guide, Social Work and Human Rights of Practice Guide. Our focus on rights and ethics is one of the things that makes social work really special for me. What do I want from social work? So for me, something that we haven't talked about yet is self-care. It's about looking after ourselves within the profession. I think that our working conditions in particular are something there's been spring last year, BASW launched a working conditions campaign. It's looking at the sort of things you'd expect about workload, reasonable workloads. What is a reasonable workload? How do we find it? What do we do if we're being asked to take on an unreasonable workload? How can BASW support you with that? Thinking about the emotional impact and what support are employers putting in place to support social workers to deal with the emotional impact of that work. And again, a plug for BASW, our PSS professional support service. It's free to all our members. It's free to members. The Scottish and Welsh governments fund it for all social workers as well. So it's it's a really positive resource. It's been evaluated by Durham University in terms of the impact that has. Then we also think about social workers who are being forced to pay for basics because of the out of their own pocket because of the really tight budgets. So thinking about how funding social work support better so that the resources that families that involve older adults, adults with learning disabilities need can be funded through appropriate mechanisms, not social workers having to dip into their own pockets. And then lastly, pay. I think we're still massively underpaid compared to other professions. Independent social workers who are going into a court process get paid about less than a half of what people from equivalent professions like OTs get if they're going as an expert witness. CAFCAS are paying its social workers, I think it's £32 an hour for being an associate. It's hardly a living wage when you think about the money that people need to live on. And we've just done our London branch has just done a survey of members in London about the amount of unpaid overtime they work. And the employers probably said, well, you can claim toil, but we also heard from members that actually most of the time they're told they can't take the time off in lieu back. There isn't time for them to take the time off in lieu. So in effect, they're working unpaid overtime. And our very back of the envelope calculation suggests that social workers in London on average are underpaid by about £9,500 when you take into account the amount of work they're doing that they're not getting either time off in lieu or overtime for. So that's work, looking after ourselves and standing up for ourselves and standing up for our profession, I think is really important, and something that BASW is going to be focusing on this year. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andrew. And you've highlighted some really important points there. I wonder if we have, because we've put a link to change the script in the chat, I wonder if we could put a link to the document that you were holding up about BASW's work on human rights, so that people can access that if they want to. And I know they'll be able to access it from the BASW website as well. So, I mean, that is a really impressive raft of ambitions for the future of our profession, and how amazing social work would look if all of that came to pass. And, you know, I think in working together and working in partnership in the ways that we described at the start of the session, there is real scope and opportunity for us to do that. So I think that's probably a good time to pause and to hand over to Gavin, who has been carefully managing the chat and the Q&A, and I've no doubt there will be lots and lots of questions from colleagues who've joined us. So Gavin.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, everyone. So yes, we've got some comments and questions. I'll start with one at random. It's making reference to the political climate where certain agendas conflict with core social work values, particularly around social justice, human rights and equity. And the question is how are Social Work England and BASW supporting social workers who work within local authorities or government organisations where organisational priorities and policies may not align with our professional ethics? And then there's a further question, what protections or guidance are available to help them navigate these tensions in practice?
Andrew, I wondered if you wanted to take that, because you literally have just been talking about something very similar.
So it's whoever asked that great question. It's a really important, and it's something that's absolutely, our inboxes in BASW are full of it. The conversations we're having with our members are absolutely full of this question: how, if I'm working for a council and where the values don't tie up with my values, how do I deal with that? I just need to sort of qualify or explain BASW's position to some extent. We have to work across the system. We have to work with people from members from all political parties. So we know that there are a much wider range of political parties represented in local government at the moment. Post the May elections, that's going to be an even bigger issue for Scotland and for Wales, but also for local government in England as well. We have to maintain party political neutrality so that we can talk to politicians who will impact on the lives and careers of our members wherever they work. That said, we will all do that in a way that absolutely upholds our core values and our core ethics. And we would encourage all our members to, one is it's just been posted in the chat, our human rights policy is in there. If you're a BASW member, you can also access our human rights practice guidance, which is 60 pages in this. It's a fantastic booklet. Anyone can download our code of ethics, which I think is really important. It's a foundational, for me, it's a foundational document in terms of what social workers are expected to do and how they're expected to behave. Within BASW, we have a variety of ways that members can get in touch with us if they're concerned. If it becomes a formal process, our advice and representation service is available to represent members in any formal process, and that's a really important part of our membership offer and one of the most valued parts of our membership offer. But we're also happy within the England team to take informal inquiries about, I'm worried about this is a concern. To engage with us, you can email us at england@basw.co.uk, and a professional officer will pick up your concern and we'll think about how to deal with that. We have a variety of thematic groups within BASW that we support. So we, as well as having groups, thematic groups that look at children, families, social work with adults, mental health, criminal justice, etc. We have a really strong professional capabilities and development group, which is helping develop the sort of structures of social work and reviewing the professional capabilities framework, for example. But we also have and Chantal is part of this, and we'll be able to add to this, the Black and Ethnic Minority Professionals Symposium, which has done some absolutely amazing work over the years, producing things like the anti-racist supervision templates, and the variety of resources that are on our website there. They just keep growing, and Wayne, who's done a lot of the work in supporting that, and Chantal in a previous life started off a lot of our work on that. And that's the latest iteration of that is something I'd highly recommend, is called Shades of Bias, which is a template and a toolkit for supporting people to deal with prejudice in the workplace. And it helps people look at it from the point of view of a victim, from the point of view of an observer, and the point of view of a perpetrator. We might use slightly different language in the toolkit, but it's about supporting people to think through where there's been an instance of bias, to think through in a very sort of restorative practice way, a no blame approach to bias, and thinking about how people can be supported to move on and grow and develop and grow through the problem, rather than going through feeling the only option is to go through a process of grievance. Grievances tend to be really destructive. They very rarely, in my experience, over 30 years as a qualified social worker, so I trump Sarah slightly, I've never seen a grievance that everyone has come out of it happy and the system has improved. They tend to actually because it's a very adversarial process, it focuses on the negative and it focuses on blame. And Shades of Bias takes completely the opposite approach. It's very much about focusing on growth and development. And it's some of the things that one of the things that probably BASW should be most proud of, because it's such a powerful tool. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea. Just to add, I said all you said absolutely spot on. And Shades of Bias is what I was going to really come and talk about a bit more as well. But before that, I was just going to say that if you're working in a space that that really does conflict you, there's that contradiction, deep in your soul. I think there's something about being true to yourself. And I think often we can feel, and I know we've got mortgages to pay and kids to feed and everything else, and sometimes we're in a job because we have responsibilities, but there has to come a point where we have a bottom line. And what is that bottom line? I think everybody has to find that for themselves, and what they're able to tolerate and what they're able to ignore, and what they have to make a stand. Part of our social work values, what we sign up to every single year, while most of us came into social work, was to advocate, was to champion, was for that social justice element. That's the bedrock. That's the foundation of who we are as social workers. And I think it's really important that we stand with that. And sometimes it may mean you raising your head above the parapet. It may mean that you have to call things out. It may mean that you have to be labeled or targeted. But it's finding that support as well in other spaces. And it may be a collective. It may be outside of the workspace. But going back to Shades of Bias, that is a really important way to think through particular situations. And as Andrew already explained, it looks at it from all the different perspectives as well, and it really helps provide a much more constructive outcome for any kind of issue that one is facing as well. So I definitely would say check that out. As you mentioned, it was Wayne, myself, and another lady called Shabnam that was really instrumental in orchestrating or pulling that together, really. And it's just taken on a life of its own in so many different spaces beyond social work as well. So absolutely, that's a way. Grievance has a place, but very rarely is the right the right outcome is achieved through that as well. So yeah, what's your bottom line, what you're able to stand in, and if you can't deal with with that, then there is something about speaking truth to power and speaking in a way that keeps your authenticity, and yeah, just keeps your morals intact, is what I want to say. So thank you. Really good question that was.
I'd like to pose another question now that's come from the audience. It's on the theme of diversity, and it's, are there plans to bridge the gap on diversity of those who would like to be in senior and leadership roles?
I don't mind talking a bit to that, even though I don't have power to enforce things, but I have. So the anti-racist movement is, as I mentioned, a Black female-led organization. Academia is the space that I inhabit, and there's something for me. And my PhD is around looking at Black women in leadership spaces, and I think that interest is a personal as well as a professional interest, as you probably guess, because of what I've seen about how difficult it is for not just Black women, but Black women, have a lot, the largest kind of majority in relation to our intersections, and how that converges to make our experiences, that much more hostile. And promotion, if the research will tell you about how difficult it is for Black women to get promotions, all the different barriers and struggles that have been documented and well documented, and I can post so many different resources to talk about that. But something, a vision that I have, and something that I'm working on, is around a leadership program, a course, a pathway that really speaks to those that are often sidelined, marginalized, or pushed to the side, or overlooked, in these spaces, and really thinking about, and it isn't just about more support, more mentoring and what have you, it's really understanding the landscape. There is the system and the structures, and as I mentioned, I work in an organization that really talks about the unconscious and the conscious, and also systems and how systems work, and how systems reproduce the stresses and the discrimination that is in wider society, and how strategically, particularly as Black women, we have to learn to navigate those spaces. So there's something about doing that introspective work on ourselves, but also understanding how the system and the people within the system come together to make our experiences that much more difficult. So yeah, as I said, I'm working with BASW at the moment, and there are lots of different things that we're thinking about, but something that's personal to me, and my research and the work that I'm doing in the personal space is around developing a program that speaks to that in a very holistic way. I'll pause. Andrew.
Right, I remembered to unmute myself, which I think is a first for me. I always forget. I think the answer to that probably depends on your employer, and there are some employers who are really taking a very conscious step towards addressing this really important issue. There are others who aren't, but the tools that are out there to support with this is the social care, workforce, race equality standards. And I think probably we should be a little bit ashamed that actually the NHS was doing this for a long time before social work and local government started doing it. So the NHS led the way with their sort of workforce race equality standards. It's if your council is taking it seriously, if you work for a council, I think it will start to make a difference. But I think there's a really important role for leadership to play. So through the Local Government Association, through ADAS, through ADCS, and the work they're doing on that as well is really important. So they have a really strong equality, and both of those organisations have really strong equality, diversity and inclusion work streams going on. I think the changes in political makeup of some councils are making that stronger. But we have heard from, without naming names or councils, some members who are working in councils where you might have expected that sort of work to be halted. People with specialist EDI roles are still just carrying on and getting on with it, and just continuing to do what they need to do to raise consciousness and raise issues. And on the whole, from what we're at the moment, we're not hearing about those roles being cut yet, which is fingers crossed. It's that they will continue to exist and continue to try and make the difference.
Thanks, Andrew and Chantal. I completely agree with what you said. Really helpful points. I suppose I just wanted to come at it from a slightly broader lens. I think there is a real issue about visible diversity at a leadership level in the profession, absolutely. But I think it's broader than that. And I think there are real issues of systemic inequality in the social work profession, which reflects some of the issues in wider society as well. And we hear about that and we talk about what's happening at all levels in social work. And we know from, some reports about the ASYE program, for instance, that colleagues from global majority backgrounds are far more likely to fail their ASYE. We know from students feedback that they have got real issues about role modeling in terms of practice education and representation from global majority backgrounds, and right the way through. So we also know that colleagues from global majority backgrounds are less likely to be put forward for training opportunities for senior roles or being posted to promotional opportunities into senior roles. So there is certainly an issue to be considered at a leadership level, but it's part of a broader issue across the profession that BASW and Social Work England together have a real opportunity, I think, to do some excellent work to try and resolve. And there is a lot happening in terms of really innovative work in parts of the country to try to address issues of EDI and discrimination.
Now, before I go on to the next question, I'm just going to come back to something that Chantal said before, which was about anxieties regarding regulation. And actually, I'm looking at you, Sarah, and Matthew in relation to that. Any thoughts in terms of what Chantal was saying there?
Yeah, I can touch on a little bit of that because I totally appreciate that that's the case. Do you know what I mean? And I've been registered to a number of different regulators, and I think sometimes just that misunderstanding of what regulation is causes some of that anxiety and definitely sort of influences on some of that anxiety. And I think for us at Social Work England, that's why engagement's been so important for us, and that's been the case since I joined the organisation sort of mid 2019, and even before that, that was Social Work England wasn't a live organisation then. We weren't the live regulator, but engagement with the profession was a feature and has remained a feature and has remained a real commitment for the organisation as we've sort of moved into different strategic cycles as well. You'll see in our strategies that engagement and co-production is central to that. And I think some of that is around informing and educating the sector on what regulation is and what it means, what our role is, what our remit is, what our objectives are, what our role isn't, because I think that's also really important to communicate. And I think that continued relationship, and I often describe it and have done over these last 6 years working for Social Work England, of sort of closing the gap between profession and regulator. We don't want there to be that sort of real huge gap between the profession and us as an organisation. We want that close relationship. We want to be able to provide that clarity, provide that information, and educate the sector on who we are, what it means to be a regulated profession, what it means to be part of a regulated profession, and then your responsibilities as part of that. And I think that will continue to be a feature for us as an organisation. We've got lots of aspirations in that space. Some of that is around students as well, engaging much more consistently with students to provide that information, to provide that advice, so that they've got that close relationship with us throughout their sort of journey to then become registered, and then beyond. And we want people to be able to maintain that relationship with us, because I think that then can reduce that anxiety. It can reduce that sort of misunderstanding, and a closer relationship with the profession is absolutely what we want to achieve as an organisation. And it's why we've got a team of regional engagement leads who are all registered social workers, work across the country, and want to establish themselves in their regions and maintain that link. And we'll maybe put a link in the chat to our webpage, which if you don't know who your regional engagement lead is, you can find that out and connect with them, and they're all really keen to do that.
Can I jump in, Gavin? Is that right? Yeah. No, I just want to pick up on Matthew's point. No, thank you for that, Matthew. About engaging with students, at the early stages of their career, because I think that's really, really important. And particularly in my role as course lead, it is something that I do talk to my students about. But how good would it be, if one of the engagement lead could come in, and meet the students at that stage, and just explain to them, what regulation is about, what your role, all of these things, because you're right, there is a misconception, and there will be, because what people don't understand, they worry about, they fear that's the anxiety kind of I was speaking to. So yeah, it just spoke to me when you mentioned about really getting to students at their the first year, second year of their course, and helping them understand really what regulation is about. Back in my day, it hasn't been 30 years, I'm not as old as some people on the call. But as students, we had to register. We had to register with GSCC. Paid our little £10. It was, and that was the way we kind of stayed connected. And obviously, as you qualify, then it went up, and it was part of an organisation or part of something bigger. I mean, there's a sense of pride in that as well. That students can buy into from the first point of entry into our profession. So yeah, I like that, and I'm not giving you any more work to do and saying you need to register students, but if there's something a little something in between that to help bridge that gap, as you mentioned, how can we do that? You want to flip the script, how can we bridge that gap as well? So just throwing it back over to you guys. Thank you,
Andrew.
It's interesting. One of the things BASW England and the other nation teams do is we offer universities a sort of introduction to BASW session, and we go out and say a bit about what BASW does, what our campaigns are. We introduce code of ethics, professional capabilities framework, etc. But we always start by saying who we're not. We're not Social Work England, because there is a really, for students, that's understandable. They're coming into the profession for the first time. Why would they know the difference between the regulator and the membership organisation? What's slightly scary is even social workers who've been registered, practicing for a long time, still get us confused. So there's definitely a sort of some work we can do between us
work to be done,
to think, to sort of articulate those differences, but also our common interest and how we work together.
And was that also a reference to my slip of the tongue earlier, Andrew?
Yeah, well, you can send me the background and I'll stick it up.
Okay. So there's another question here, slightly different, but I think it's quite an important one. Is with the increase of social media, there are many pages naming and shaming social workers and adding to this negative narrative of the profession. How can we shift this narrative and address these negative views?
Well, I mean, sorry, Andrew, you had your hand up.
Oh, go on.
I was just going to say, I don't think it's the remit of just one individual or one organisation to take that on. I think it has to be us working together, and that speaks very well to the theme of World Social Work Day in Harambee. It also speaks to what we were trying to do through the Change the Script campaign, through addressing some of those negative media stereotypes. And I've been doing some radio interviews over the last day or so about the campaign, and I've talked about what we see through programs like EastEnders and Hollywood films that show these awful stereotypes of a social worker unilaterally forcibly removing a child from his family. And that it's just not an accurate portrayal of what social work does, and it doesn't help when you're a busy social worker with a day full of visits ahead of you. It doesn't help you do your best work. It doesn't encourage you to stay in the profession. It doesn't encourage the next generation of social workers. So I think there is a real ongoing role for Social Work England and BASW together to be addressing some of those negative perceptions, some of those inaccurate portrayals of social work, and challenging it, and then highlighting just what social work does. As we talked about earlier in the session, the breadth and the extent of it, and the impact and value that social work has to society, and the positive change that it affects in so many people's lives every day.
Thank you, Sarah. And Andrew, I think you're going to have the last word today.
Okay. Yeah. So doxing, I think, as it's known, isn't it? Sort of naming and shaming people online, it is a big issue for our members. We haven't yet. BASW's got SASW, Scottish Association of Social Workers, Northern Ireland, have published mini guides to doxing. We're about to publish the England version. They're virtually the same, but it's just sort of referencing different organisations about how to deal with it. The main message from that is prevention. Is, if as a social worker, think very carefully about your online presence. Very strong advice is to use slightly different names or totally different names between your professional profile and your personal profile. So, you know, whether and just and the guide sort of goes through some practical steps you can take about the main thing being prevent it happening in the first place. So it's something that I think when you enter the profession as a student is to start to think along those sort of lines, to keep that separate. I think, you know, in terms of professionally, the only social media I use, am I allowed to say this, is LinkedIn, because it's the only one that seems to be reasonably safe online. So I don't use any of the other social media on a professional basis. So keeping a really strong separation between your personal and professional social media accounts, I think, is really important. If anybody wants to email england@basw.co.uk, once we've got our version published, we can send out copies, and it'll be on our website soon.
Thank you, Andrew. And a call, I suppose, for everyone to take a look at websites for Social Work England as well as BASW, because I think some of the other questions have been around both registration and membership of the two separate organisations. We are at 3 o'clock, so I just want to say a final thank you to the panel today. I think it's been very helpful for all the social workers out there. And remember, everybody, you can still book on to some of our other events that are coming up across the week, and we hope to see you there soon. Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy World
Bye.
Social Work Day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.